Hello friends, in this video there is bad news for Ukraine. European solidarity is a beautiful thing, as long as it unfolds on the pages of newspapers over a glass of good wine. But when it comes to real money, protecting national sovereignty, or God forbid, as in the case of Poland, the most complex issues of historical memory, all that gloss instantly disappears. What comes to the surface is the harsh and cynical pragmatism of old Europe. We'll discuss everything now. Please leave a like even though the news is bad. Support the channel with your likes. Aerodynamica is aware. Friends, subscribe right now. Check your notification bell if you know what I mean. Now let's get down to business. Let's take a detailed look at why the unconditional and eternal support for Kiev suddenly ran into the rigid barrier of national interests of our dear Western partners, and how the economy once again reduced feel-good politics to nothing. Let's talk about the first, probably the most interesting point. European steel outweighed solidarity. Let's start with the most tangible thing, money. After all, no matter how loud the slogans sound from the podiums, harsh economic interests always dictate their own tough rules. As of July 1st, Brussels, with a flick of the wrist, has almost halved the total quota for duty-free steel imports into the European Union. It used to be 39 million tons, but now it's a modest 18.3 million. Who do you think suffered the most from this? That's right, Ukraine. Initially, the Eurocrats were generous enough to set a mocking annual quota of 713,000 tons. So, to give you an idea of the scale, to understand the scale of the disaster, this would mean an instant and irreversible collapse of 73% of all Ukrainian metallurgical exports to the EU. A full-fledged economic knockout to the applause of the Allies, and not just the Allies. Yes, right now you can probably even read about it in the comments. By the way, I removed those guys, so don't think I'm intentionally creating a breeding ground for them here. Moving on, let's get back to the topic. Our old acquaintances, the young Europeans, have taken the stage. The Baltic countries, Scandinavia, meaning Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they all rushed to our defense, begging the European Commission to make an exception for Kiev, or at least raise the limit. Come on, people are at war, what are you doing? But Poland, on the other hand, took a diametrically opposite and extremely tough stance. Warsaw stood in the way of Ukrainian steelmakers, demanding the strictest restrictions be enforced. Why, one might ask, should you pay and repent, when you can use the situation to protect your own producers and clear the domestic market of cheap competitors? As a result, after long behind-the-scenes battles, they reached this compromise, right? They still raised the individual quota for Ukraine for 9 categories of steel products, up to almost 1 million tons. But for the Ukrainian mining and steel sector, it's still a complete disaster. This means a guaranteed loss of 60% of exports. The irony is that this is happening exactly when Ukrainian factories, under constant shelling and rolling blackouts, are performing, creating an economic miracle. Because in 2025 they increased iron ore exports by a quarter. That is, it was 2.65 million tons. But they cut it off pretty harshly, right? So experts have already calculated that the potential losses for the industry will be over $1 billion annually, 1.2 billion to be exact. That's how market logic works. Friendship is friendship, but business is business. But this isn't the end, my friends. Unfortunately, there is very little good news. We'll save this good news for the end, just to soften the blow a bit, to sweeten it. The ghost of Volhynia in Brussels, a historical dead end. Economic disagreements in Warsaw and Kiev instantly, like a chain reaction, detonated in the political sphere as well. Fortunately, you don't have to look long for a reason for this. As always happens in Eastern Europe, historical memory became that reason. Volodymyr Alexandrovich Zelensky decided to rename a special operations unit in honor of the UPA heroes. The response from Warsaw came immediately, and loud and clear. And if it were just another, let's say, internal squabble, they talked and moved on, but the European Parliament later published the official resolution text, where, in plain language, without unnecessary diplomatic equivocations, they criticized this move, calling it an unnecessary and unprovoked escalation. The Poles politely but firmly reminded their colleagues about the Volhynia massacre and the tens of thousands of victims. And it's stated directly in the document, such attempts to glorify historical figures like these undermine good neighborly relations, and in general they are completely incompatible with the so-called European values. Subscribe to the channel, friends. An interesting piece is coming, probably Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, since I found an article. An article about this story. Those who love history, I think, won't miss it. This is the Volhynia tragedy, the Volhynia massacre, but from a different perspective than the Polish view. I'm still considering whether to release this video. Write in the comments if you want the video, if you're interested or not. Let's return to the topic. Official Kyiv via Foreign Ministry spokesperson Georgy Tykhy quickly tried to appear confident despite the setback. He says it's all manipulations by journalists, malicious gossip, and the scandalous paragraph itself was artificially added by certain deputies at the last moment. While the rest of the document supposedly expresses full and unwavering support. But Mr. Tykhy, who are you trying to fool? The fact remains. Polish MEPs from the European People's Party pushed this amendment through firmly and professionally. Moreover, their colleagues from the Conservative Law and Justice Party even demanded to link the very possibility of Ukraine joining the EU. With the final resolution of historical disputes over the ethnic cleansing in Volhynia, at the same time drawing direct parallels between the ideology of the UPA and Nazism. The signal is clear. The free lunch is over, and as for paying, you will pay for historical debts and more. Well, that's how it is. What else caught my attention, friends? The NATO summit took place in Ankara, in Turkey, and in Navratske. Well, okay, Navratske, yes, right now. To fully grasp the scale of the political cooling, let's move to sunny Ankara, where the presidents of Poland and Ukraine met face to face. There you go, and what do you think? According to both sides, the conversation lasted more than an hour. But the results turned out to be, to put it mildly, rather modest. The Polish leader Karl Nawrocki came out to the press calmly after the meeting and stated that they were unable to resolve the historical issues. And he added, well, damn, he said, we didn't really have much hope anyway. And in fact, Mr. Karl Nawrocki himself was extremely clear, drawing red lines saying, for me, issues concerning the UPA are not up for discussion. The emotions of the Poles regarding the Volyn tragedy are a real problem. That's how it is. And in fact, the level of relations between Kyiv and Warsaw at the highest presidential level has plummeted quite rapidly. And in fact, Nawrocki demonstratively withdrew in response to the Ukrainian toponymic initiatives. Well, and basically we've already talked about this, yes, about the White Eagle. By the way, friends, the historical material I'm talking about was prepared. I'll just retell it, yes. It was prepared by Norman Davies. By the way, he is a Knight of the Order of the White Eagle. That is, he is a person whom Poland has honored at the highest level. So you don't think I'm quoting some Ukrainian Fomenko or someone else who doesn't even know history. So let's get back to the topic. Both leaders in Ankara ritually said the traditional words in front of the camera that, yes, Russia is a long-term threat to NATO countries. But nevertheless, the former brotherly embraces are gone. The head of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, Sibiga, is now desperately trying to bring some packages to Warsaw. Anti-crisis measures to somehow ease the tension. But you can't turn back the clock on this situation. When the foundations of trust are broken, diplomatic band-aids don't work well. What else, friends, caught my attention? The theater of the absurd in the European Parliament, the case of Grzegorz Braun. There's significant geopolitical drama in the Ukraine-Poland relationship. But there was also a purely comedic mise-en-scène that perfectly illustrates to what level of caricature European domestic politics can reach when the usual patterns are broken. During the roll call vote for this very anti-UPA resolution in the European Parliament, a curious incident occurred. The main, most fierce, uncompromising critic of official Kyiv in Poland, a deputy from the Confederation, a maverick. No, okay, Grzegorz Braun, that's his call sign, pirate, yes. He suddenly voted against the amendment that condemns Zelensky for, well, glorifying the UPA. The man spent years building his political career on tough anti-Banderite rhetoric and defending Polish historical memory. At the decisive moment, he ended up in the same boat with some Polish left liberals like Daria Siemski, Krzysztof Smiszek, and other left liberals like them. Ugh. So, in short, they also didn't support the tough wording. Of course, you could laugh at this. Why did it turn out this way? Maybe Braun, Mr. Braun, just got confused with the many buttons. Well, there are two buttons, try to figure it out. I'm with the Confederation, come on, what are you doing? Or maybe his logic of always being against any official decision from Warsaw just backed him into a corner. He's thinking, damn, what should I do? What should I do? I'm confused. Well, of course, it looked like a first-rate piece of political grotesquerie. So the main defender of the memory of the Volhynia victims actually ended up siding with those who, well, kind of ignore that memory. Well, that's how it is. Interesting, right? Next, we have another piece of news. Berlin is closing up shop. The Taurus missiles aren't coming. News from Germany that finally completes this bleak geopolitical still life for Ukraine. While Ukrainians argue with the Poles about steel quotas and heroes of the past, the German Bundestag put on a show for the local "Let's Go to War" crowd. A resolution that demanded Berlin sharply increase military support, provide Ukraine with long-range Taurus cruise missiles, Patriot PAC-3 air defense systems, and also directly finance large-scale production of Ukrainian drones to strike deep into Russian territory. All of this failed miserably. The numbers behind German pragmatism, my friends, speak for themselves. With your permission, I will read them out. 79 deputies voted in favor. Damn, I didn't know they had so many deputies. Do they really have almost 600 or 700 deputies? And 510 deputies voted against. What's remarkable is that both representatives of the ruling coalition and opposition parties stood united against this escalation. German citizens are very tired of inflation, factory closures, and questionable energy reforms. Well, they gave their representatives a hint. It's time to put an end to all this chaos, which also threatens to directly drag Germany into World War III. Enough. Well, friends, if any of you are English, write in the comments if you know which Englishman said, when you choose between shame and war, if you choose shame, you will get both shame and war. Western society is very tired, yes, tired of solving other people's economic problems at the expense of their own wallets, tired of turning a blind eye to other people's historical peculiarities that fundamentally contradict their own basic myths, yes, in some cases, like with the Poles. Most importantly, it is tired of taking risks. Although they haven't even risked even 1% of their personal safety and comfort yet. Capitalism, national selfishness, cold calculation always. Sooner or later they prevail over temporary political alliances. And judging by the results of the latest votes in Brussels and Berlin, well, let's see what this will mean for Ukraine in the long run. It's a harsh, cynical, and very costly reality for Kyiv. Well, that's how it is. There is some good news, friends. Give me a second, I had it here somewhere. Just 1 minute, literally. Sorry about that, please. So, Taras Kachka, Deputy Prime Minister. The ambassadors of the European Union have approved the opening of the 6th cluster of negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the European Union, which covers the area of external relations. Good news. Everyone is happy, right? Unfortunately, my friends, well, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I would be happy to look for good news, and I'm even preparing some material. Tomorrow or the day after, there will be only good news from Poland. Well, that's how things are at the moment. Thank you very much for your attention. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Friends, that's all for now. See you next time. To be continued.